What are your greatest strengths? This is pretty much basic interviewing 101. It's a fairly common interview question, but like every interview question, there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. And today, I'm gonna give you 3 keys that are gonna help you answer this question in the best way possible. So this is a basic interview question, in my opinion, and it's not particularly hard to answer. I do think, however, that it is hard to master, to execute it perfectly, because it's so wide open. There's so many things you could say, and I would say that candidates, generally speaking, when they make a mistake, they make one of 2 mistakes. So the first mistake is that they list too many strengths. They are not specific, right? So when you're asked this question, they go on and on and on, they ramble, they list a whole bunch of things. And the second mistake that candidates make is they list strengths that aren't specific to the role, right? Like if your job was to be an accountant and your greatest strength was you can bench press 500 pounds, that doesn't matter. So those are the 2 things. So I'm gonna jump into it real quick and I'm gonna talk about each one of those things and how you can kind of dial in and make sure you're answering correctly. But those are the mistakes people make. So let's talk about the first one. When it comes to your greatest strengths, think quality, not quantity. All of us have many strengths, right? If you made a list of all the strengths you have, no doubt it would go on for a while. But are they all your greatest strengths? And I think that's an important distinction when you answer this question. They have to be things that are significant, right? They've got to be strong traits, and you want to pick a few that are really impactful. That brings me to point 2. You need to think about relevancy. So the 2 words here are quality and relevancy. So think about the role, right? In every single role that you'll ever have in your lifetime, you could probably pinpoint 1, 2, or 3 things that are just more important than the rest of it. If your greatest strengths aren't aligned with those things, you are missing an absolute opportunity. So those are kind of the basics, right? Making sure you're picking out a few, not 10 or 11 or 12, and making sure that they're relevant to the job that you're actually doing. The last thing I want to talk about is story. So one of the ways you can choose to answer this question is by leveraging a story from your past. Now, stories are powerful interview tools. Because when it comes to stories, they're just more memorable, right? If someone tells you, I'm really great at handling competing deadlines, or they tell you a story about a time they successfully handled a competing deadline, and it was a huge success for the organization, which one's gonna stick out? It's the story. So another thing you can do is you can talk quickly about your strengths that are relevant to the job and say, for example, and give a brief story that illustrates these strengths that you have. Now, one of the things you'll notice I just said is brief. It is important to not go on forever here. If you're gonna pick a strength or 2 to tell a story about, to reinforce those strengths and give an actual example, it's important that you don't go on for 2 to 3 minutes. Like every question, it's important to take an appropriate amount of time to answer it. And with this one, you don't want to drone on forever. So if you think about an example and you want to use a story, I think it's a great idea to drive the point home, but I think it's also really important to be succinct and tell it in a fair amount of time. I would say with this question, you want to aim for less than a minute. So there you have it. Again, this is one of those questions that I don't think is overly complicated to answer. I think it is easy enough to answer, but it's a massive opportunity because this is an opportunity for you to talk about some of the things that make you a great fit for the role and to include a story, an achievement, an accomplishment that you might otherwise not get a time to talk about. Similar to the question, why should we hire you? This one's open-ended enough that you can kind of take it in whatever way you see fit, but you should certainly use it in a way that is strategic in nature. So there you go. That's how I would go about answering the interview question, what are your greatest strengths? Good luck in your next interview. You got this.